Welcome back to Bunny Banter, the first and only podcast for everything Killer Bunnies. I'm your host Matt, here with co-host Mikey.
Hello.
And as a guest today we have Joseph, the creator of the Killer Bunnies Discord.
Hello, that's me.
So, fun fact, we already attempted to record this once, but then I didn't realize about 35 minutes in that OBS was being evil and not recording the audio for Joseph and Mikey. So this is definitely going to feel natural. Uh, today, so what we talked about today, Mikey?
Okay, so let's see. Maybe I can say this a little smoother than the last time I did it. We are going to be talking about the next 3 episodes. We are going to be talking about the La-di-Da London booster expansion set. And the next 3 episodes leads up to when it finally is released to the public. We are going to continue on from the cards that we discussed last episode with Jeff and Jonathan, and we're going to be discussing today specific run card that will be in the booster expansion set.
Okay, so that should be exciting. This discussion might go slightly faster for some of these cards because we already discussed them and it was not recorded. So that's fun. So looking at the first card here, for those on the YouTube, I have the pictures up. For those listening elsewhere, I will read the card text. So we have a run card that requires a bunny. Choose a carrot. Maybe use once by a player to choose a carrot from Cabal's Market. Choose 2 carrots if you were born in the United Kingdom. So different from other choose a carrots with the extra clause of gain an extra carrot if you're in the United Kingdom. Thoughts on this one, Joseph?
So I'm not actually from the UK, so I don't know if I'll be able to take advantage of this particular card. But if I ever do play with some friends on our Discord, then I'm sure we're bound to play with someone from the UK eventually.
Eventually, perhaps. So yeah, that's pretty exciting that we have another unique interaction with very unique things about the player. Adds to the list of optimized player, along with being under the age of 18 and being the oldest opponents and being female. We can add to the list of being optimal to be born in the UK. Your thoughts, Mikey?
Um, oh, this is kind of strange because we've been through all this before, but I'm going to say it again, even though I know what Matt's going to say. But one of the things that been thinking about with this is at the beginning of the game, you're able to declare your gender. So it'd be awesome, if you could just declare what country you're from, where you were born in, at the beginning of the game, and then gain the advantage of that. And then everybody can say that they were born in the UK, and then everybody can use the advantage if they get it. So
I think that's an accurate representation for why it's not, at least as far as we know, not allowed to declare where you're born. Or at least identify as being born somewhere else than you actually were. So yeah, it should be. Maybe we'll get a United Kingdom community up on Killer Bunnies. So if
there you
anyone
go.
listening is from the United Kingdom, there you go. You now have an advantage. Congratulations. You should play full set. Okay, moving on to the next card here. Choose a carrot. Greenwich mean time. Run requires a bunny. Maybe use once by player to choose a number of carrots equal to the current time in London, minus a number rolled on the orange die. So for example, if it was 9 o'clock in London and you rolled a 3 on the orange die, you would receive 6 carrots. So thoughts on this one, Mikey?
Goodness, I gotta remember what I said before.
Not necessarily.
Let's see. Oh yeah. So the ideal time to play this would be when it is 12 o'clock in London, and then you need to roll a 1. That's pretty good because then you can get 11 cards out of this specific card if you're lucky. That's pretty neat. However, it may slow down game time just a little bit because, who's going to know off the top of their head what time it is in London? So then you have either, even if you do know what time zone they're in, you have to sit and stare at the clock and count. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, how many hours or whatever is behind or ahead of us. Or that you have to actually take your phone out and you have to look it up. But if you get those 11 carrots, it's all worth it.
There you go. Choose 11 carrots. OP. Can we hear power creep? Or choose 0 carrots, your choice. Definitely nothing in between. How about you, Joseph? What do you think?
Oh, so you know what? So I actually thought about something that we didn't think about initially when we first discussed this, and that's um when we play on the Discord, since we're all from different time zones, this card puts a heavy emphasis on where exactly you're playing. So would that mean that we would have to declare which time zone we're using for this card?
Well, thankfully for this card, it only relies on the London time zone because you're only subtracting the die roll. So it doesn't matter which time zone
Oh,
you're in. But for other cards, that is certainly relevant, and what we end up doing is using the time zone of the player of the card. So for example, if you want to play
I see, I
After
see.
Darkness, what we decide on doing is if it's after sunset in your time zone
Hmm.
is what we usually end up doing, but it's not the best way to do so, but there isn't really an alternative. So something to note with this card in case anyone was wondering and didn't want to bother to look up, I believe the optimal time to play this card is 6 p.m. or 6 a.m. Central, because then it would be 12 a.m. or p.m. in London. So then with the average roll of 6, you'd be choosing an average of 6 carats. That's pretty good. Choose 6 carats. Not really conditional, only conditional on time. We're used to choose 3 carats for reference as a pretty high number. That is.
So
Go ahead.
when they add this card in, I'm speculating that because they're gonna have this card has the potential to choose up to 11 carats. That they might be adding more. This is my pure speculation that they might be adding more carats into the game. It
Yep,
can't just.
we do know that they are adding more carrots. Mikey and I know more than some. But
Oh,
on
I
on
see.
on on the previous Bunny Banter, we did preview the 4 carrots that are being added with London. And besides those, we know, at least it's public information, that more carrots are coming. Not necessarily the exact number. I don't know if that was described in the Bunny Banter, but there are more carrots coming. So, Jeff blessed that these cards are in the game to decrease game length.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought. But yes, choose 6 carrots will be quite nice. And for
We
those of,
do.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask. Since we do have cards like these coming into the game, are we gonna have more? Are we gonna see more cards like I believe it was something freshness center.
Oh, Wheels Freshness Center.
Yes,
That's a
yeah.
scary one. I don't
If you
believe we
don't
have one of those in London, if I
in
remember
London,
correctly. In London, we don't have a
but
card like that. Eventually.
eventually, I speculate that there will be more cards like that if we're gonna have more of these choose a carrot cards coming to the game.
Yeah, that's a good point. Recently, in the most recent expansions released, we had Swordfish of Damocles, which was released in either Fantastic or Caramel. I can't remember now. I'll look it up. But that one caused the player with the most carrots to return all their carrots. However, there was a huge conditional behind it with the die roll. Let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, it was creature feature. So that one required the opponent to roll 8 dice, and he had to roll the digits of the current year. So 2019, he'd have to roll a 2, 0, 1, 9 on 8 dice. That's a difficult condition. So
Mhm.
we are seeing more of those cards being released on with kind of the theme of Wheels Special Center of returning large amounts of carrots. However, it seems to be the case that they're more conditional and more controlled, similar to something like Zodiac Terminator or Mother Tucker, controlled on that level,
Mhm.
where it requires a very sizable die roll. I mean, even Wheels Special Center is fairly controlled since it only punishes an opponent if they actually spent all their money. If they didn't spend their money, just $2 per carrot, and that's not much.
Yeah, that's not too
Except
bad.
for, that one time or that time where, maybe somebody like Matt goes, he purchases all but 1 carrot, spends all of his dollar, and then you play with freshness center, and then he has to return all the carrot.
Yeah, that was a great game, Mikey, of that start set where I decided, hey, I'm going to give Mikey an opportunity to end the game since he has $10, and his very next run card was Wheels Freshness Center. Wasn't that nice?
That was real nice.
I can't remember who won that game, but it lasted a while
Uh,
longer after that
it
play.
did.
That was a sad day. I'm just glad it was a starter set game and not a full set, otherwise we would have been there for another 2 hours.
Ugh.
Oof, that would have been bad. Just recently I had a remix game where someone played Mystery Urn. You know, remix games usually last like half an hour. This game lasted an hour and a half because
Ah.
somebody played Mystery Urn, for the memes, of course. And nobody rolled a 12 throughout the whole process, so we had to return
Oh.
all of our carrots and we had to discard all of our bunnies. And we were near the end game, and most of the choose 2 carrots had already been used. So yeah, that's always fun. So it's definitely nice to see more cards like this, and there are more in London that I don't believe are discussed today, but will be discussed, that gain large amounts of carrots. So that's very exciting. Moving on to the least exciting card we're talking about today, Random Feed the Bunny, which is rolling for Radish and Milk. And we've seen this card before because it came out in Pumpkin Spice. So we can speculate that we'll actually be getting one more of these Random Feed the Bunny cards for Radish and Milk, since there are 3 for Cabbage and Water. And this will be our second one for Radish and Milk. Uh, Anything we want to mention about this one?
Well, I could talk about how I don't understand why well, now I kind of understand because you explained it to me when we went through this whole thing before. But the whole thing with the die being, you know, green and blue when you're rolling for Radish and Milk, and I had suggested red and clear because you can't really use a white die, but the clear wouldn't work either. It's a mess. But you think that somewhere it could have been figured out that they could have used red and white or red and clear. But yeah, we'll just that's the thing, and yeah.
Yeah, it messes up the other cards with that interact with Radish. Well, actually, I believe, there might there might be some that interact with Radish and presume it to be red. But there are other cards that interact with Radish and presume it to be green. So that's an interesting thing that I hadn't considered before. There's I can't remember what it's called now. Is it Through the Looking Glass? Is that the one I'm thinking of? No, that's Cabbage Water. It's one similar to that, except it's for radish and cabbage, where radish is rolled as red and cabbage is rolled as green. So it makes sense for radish to be red in some cases,
Yep.
but then in other instances where presumably we're getting the equivalent to Super Supply Surprise for the Blue Plate Special and the Almond Crisp Booster coming out in 2 years. At least we have a good idea that we're getting that. And that would normally roll the red die for pawns. So all of a sudden we have we have to have the reddish be green in that case because red is already designated to pawns. The
Yeah.
nice thing about the artwork here on this card is that on the dice table that the bunny is rolling on in the picture, the green die is closer to the radish section, the blue die is closer to the milk section, so it makes it clear which die is which.
Yeah, that I didn't even notice that, but that's true.
Yeah, so that's helpful at least. Okay, now moving on to the actual exciting cards, and we've already discussed two of these, but we'll discuss them again. So the first one here is Day Trippers, a roaming red bunny. It's a double red bunny that roams to the next vacant underground station numerically every round of play. Day Trippers is a double red bunny and may be combined with any other red or half red bunny to form a bunny triplet. So let's quick review what the underground stations do. If you haven't seen last episode or forgotten, the underground stations are cards that are played immediately into the bunny circle. And whenever the ones that we're getting in London are numbers 1 through 10, and they're red. So anytime the red die is rolled, if you have the underground station of that number, so if the red die rolled 7 and you had underground station number 7, you can reposition a bunny with an oyster cracker. And the oyster crackers are usually run cards that are bunny modifiers. Note here with Day Trippers that it actually comes with an oyster cracker, as you can see in the picture. At least we presume that to be the case, from what Jeff has implied. We haven't actually seen the bunny bits. So something to note here is that these Day Trippers will interact with the normal bunny underground station mechanics along with roaming. So Joseph, any thoughts on the Day Trippers?
I would like to point out that this card reminds me of the Bunny Ranger that we've already seen from a previous expansion. And this card it's like because the Bunny Ranger was blue, but this card is featuring red bunnies. So it's like the more powerful version of the Bunny Ranger.
Yep. Especially since it's a double red, because then you can combine it with one bunny or pawn and form that triplet.
hmm
How about you, Mikey? Some initial thoughts on this card?
Well, I think that this is kind of a neat card here because, well, for a couple of reasons. The one thing is, if you are the one with all of the underground station, well, then you have this for perpetuity. Uh, but a couple ideas I thought of was if you have a underground station and you don't have a bunny, well, you're guaranteed to, well, almost guaranteed to at least have a bunny for one round of play then once it comes to you. So that's kind of nice. It gives you a brief opportunity to be able to have a bunny if perhaps, there's not another bunny for the next 50 cards to be drawn. Um, so at least you have an opportunity to play some aggressive cards. Even if you have the Heavenly Halo too. And if you just have the Heavenly Halo and this one's just roaming around, then you'll be able to at least still play some aggressive cards. Oh, I just had another thought there. It's right at the tongue.
I'd like to know what you guys think about having a double bunny roaming
That is
around the
an
board.
yeah, that is an interesting thing because it's only roaming among the underground stations, so only the players with underground stations are benefiting from this. So it's definitely interesting that we have the double bunny roaming because it highly benefits anyone with that red pawn or the red bunny to add to it. I think it's
Yeah,
definitely going to incentivize buying at least one red pawn anytime this bunny is in play. which once Almond Crisp comes out, we'll actually have the opportunity to buy up to 4 red pawns. So that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
Is red pawn going to be the new black pawn that everyone wants?
Ooh.
With the underground stations and day trippers being considered.
And if you had another thought I just had is if you had a red bunny, say with the heavenly halo, which don't put the heavenly halo on a red bunny. That just doesn't. It's not.
You're asking for trouble then.
Yeah. But if you did, for some reason, you would still be able to have a triplet every time this came around. So you'd actually get to play twice. And so you could play more aggressive.
That
The
is
other
true.
thing that I thought of is that this is you have an opportunity here to be able to play aggressively without necessarily being labeled as aggressive, kind of. Because if you have a underground station, well, you don't know if if this card's going to be late or not. You just have the underground, and then somebody lays this card, and then you have an opportunity to get a triplet, or if you have the Heavenly Halo, play an aggressive card. So nobody can actually blame you for having this card when it comes to, or rotates to you through the underground station, no matter how it gets. So that was an interest. I just heard someone.
Jeff West.
But so that's kind of an interesting side effect, I think, is that you can play aggressively or at least gain a triplet without necessarily being labeled as aggressive, depending on when you purchase either the red pawn or have a singular red bunny. Although if you just have a red bunny, you're probably already labeled as aggressive anyway. So
Probably. Depends if there's a pink bunny out.
true.
It's always relative when it comes to passivity meta, a little bit relative. Uh, Something that I want to mention with this card is similar to how if you had Lonely Ranger in between 2 barriers, and let's just say 2 players are involved, if you had only 2 players with underground stations, you can essentially bypass the 1 trade rule, or at least bypass what the normal thing would be considered the exploit of the 1 trade rule, or the exploit that would exist if the 1 trade rule didn't exist. I've confused myself by now. But anyways, if you have this out and only 2 players have underground stations, then this bunny will be the other players each round. So your round, 1 round it'll be your bunny, the next round it'll be the other player's bunny. And that's a pretty cool interaction where you have a bunny that that's being moved from player to player consistently, but it isn't being traded. So it could create some
Yeah.
interesting passive strategies as well as the allowing for the more aggressive strategies by having the double red that people don't necessarily want to target because they could get the bunny anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps all strategies. And something that was mentioned when we tried to record this before is that this bunny does have the Jupiter symbol. So it is relevant with the card Hitch Bunny's Guide that can recover cards with the Jupiter symbol on them. So I think this will be a good candidate for recovery with Hitch Bunny's Guide, since it has all those potential benefits for any playstyle it can work with. As long as you have a underground station. If you don't have a underground station, feels bad. Because then it'll just rotate away from you and you'll never get it back, unlike Lonely Ranger. Anything else we wanted to say on Day Trippers before we move on to the next card?
I can see the strat of using the Heavenly Halo on this bunny. If
There
you
is
have the red
potential
pawn.
there. Yeah, that Heavenly Halo on Day Trippers with Red Pawn. I agree. I think that's an excellent combo.
Ooh, that's interesting.
That would
I
be
like
a
that.
heavy commitment though.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes. It makes, especially if, I'm going to say that's really good, especially if all the opportunities to purchase red pawns are gone. You know, if all the white pawns and both the red pawns, soon there'll be 2 of each pawn. Currently it's just the 1 red pawn, 1 white pawn, which is very easy to buy. If those are gone, and you put the halo on this, and you have a underground station, that's impossible to kill, impossible to steal, because it'll rotate back to you. Triplet.
Yeah.
And sure, you only have it
That's
once every so many rounds, but you just plan your turns accordingly. I really like that
Yeah.
strategy. I'm excited to use it
And
once I get the
people-
2-card combo.
And like you said, then, well, actually, no wait. Oh wow. So that's pretty much impossible to destroy then.
Yeah, because the standard counter to the halo
Wow.
is to steal it, and this is already being moved anyways. It's the same logic of using Lonely Ranger when you're gambling for Poverty Poker. You use Lonely Ranger
Yeah.
because you're going to lose him anyways, and he's going to come back anyways. This one, he's going to come
Now,
back even more consistently because only you, because you have the underground stations, and some players presumably don't.
yeah. So here's a question then, and we're going to be getting to this next, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. So the next card that we're going to be talking about is Didn't Mind the Gap. Now, Didn't Mind the Gap, would that be able to affect this if it had the Heavenly Halo on it?
It would
Or-
not.
Wow.
At least by mechanical consistency, we know that would not.
That's OP.
Wow.
That's a brilliant thing you thought of, Joseph. I didn't even. Whoa,
There we go, Joseph.
crazy.
Imagine.
I'm scared.
Exactly. It's a permanent double bunny just roaming around the board for the entire game.
Wow.
Roaming around a
Oh.
limited portion of the board of all things. Imagine
Exactly.
creating imagine the alliance that this would create between the players that have the underground stations, because by playing the Heavenly Halo, which would normally sometimes be considered aggressive on a bunny like a double bunny or a triplet bunny or a red bunny, not to mention a double red bunny. All of a sudden, that is actually a passive play because you're also helping the opponents with underground stations, and you have created this excellent bunny that's helping everyone with the underground stations and completely isolating everyone without. I like it. I'm excited. It's going to go excellently with my aggressive passive hybrid strategy I've been using recently.
Oh, goodness.
Mikey's still suffering
that's
from.
terrible. I just gotta tell you, there was a Jarnac situation that was awful. It just further
Yes.
impressed my hatred of the Jarnac. I started targeting myself in protest of Jarnac.
That's how. If you remember, if anyone's watched the second episode of the passivity meta, at that point the aggressive passive hybrid was just basically discovered that the day before because we were going to discuss hybrid strategies, and I didn't think the aggressive passive could possibly exist, but then I actually tried it and it was very viable. So now that's the strategy I've been using recently, and boy, it's toxic against neutral aggressive to aggressive players. Essentially, you take advantage of all the passive players. More or less. They also benefit from it, though, is the thing. It's not taking advantage, is the incorrect phrasing. But what happened was Frank, our excellent passive player, did the worst possible play in a 3-player game of playing the Jarnac in between the other 2 players, me and Mikey, so that we could only target him.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, not necessarily. We could only directly target him. So he made the most passive. He made the most passive strategy possible in making it so that only he could be targeted. And because of all those memes, I highly respected his play and found workaround ways to exclusively target Mikey.
Oh,
So
it was awful. It was so bad.
It became a 2-player Jarnac scenario, which is notorious for the player who's generating the most dollar per turn will win that scenario. Or the person who can find the workarounds. And I happened to get 4 breakdown bunnies out of 5 in the deck throughout the game. Absolutely toxic. So yes, I'm very excited about this card because it's going to go excellently with aggressive passive. Make sure all the passive players have underground stations, and then you've created an immortal bunny that benefits all the passive players and everyone's friends with you. It's excellent. Then everyone else hates you, so you can target them all you want. There we go. Thank you, Joseph, for enlightening us on that excellent strategy.
It was just a little something. I came up with what you guys were talking about, the Halo. I was like, wait a second. An immortal bunny that just travels between exclusive players? Like that's that's uh that's a very I don't know how to describe this. Like superficial play, or superficial, is that the right word? I don't know,
Perhaps.
I can't even comprehend it. I can't even comprehend what was just created. The
Now,
card isn't even out yet.
now I want to try it with a lonely ranger bunny that's enclosed between two barriers and is only helping a portion of the players. Although it's not quite the same since on bouncing on the barriers it hits the same player again. So it benefits the
Mhm.
players on the edges more, while uh, the card we just looked at benefits the players who have the most underground stations more. So it's interesting. I'm
Yeah.
very excited to try it as soon as I get the opportunity. Moving on to the next card here that was briefly mentioned by Mikey, Didn't Mind the Gap, a run card that's aggressive, maybe used once to eliminate any bunny on a underground station, and no, it cannot kill the Halo. So there we go,
Oof.
we have a card that can just strictly kill any bunny in the underground station. Thoughts on this one, Mikey?
I think it's kind of nice. If you don't have a underground station, and people who are playing aggressive passive and are being to you do, and they say that they have, the day trippers is going around, or some other powerful bunny with an oyster cracker is going around, and they don't have the heavenly halo on them. Um, this is a wonderful opportunity to ruin someone's. So, by getting rid of that roaming bunny that goes around the bunder stations and destroying your life, you can destroy its life by ending. That's a wonderful card. And the only thing, well, actually, a couple things. I like the reference to Mind the Gap, which is that, you know, that's one of the things that I think a lot of people, when you talk about Great Britain and stuff, Mind the Gap, may come to mind. And also, that bunny is going to die. Uh, it's going to get run over by that tram, but it's kind of cool, slightly creepy artwork. Uh, but yeah, it's going to die.
I hate to say this, Mikey, but you gave me another thought on the aggressive passive strategy. What
Oh
if
no!
we take our day trippers idea and we apply it to something like, let's just say, the pink lethal? So what we do
Oof.
is we passively play the oyster cracker on the pink lethal, and we play the heavy halo on the pink lethal. So normally you'd play an oyster cracker on an opponent's bunny, but this time you're playing it on your own because you have a underground station. So all of a sudden you have a mortal pink lethal that once it's stolen, because it's bound to be stolen by something,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden all it takes is for you to roll the red die and get the correct number, and you'll steal it back. You have a
There you go.
consistent way to steal back your high value bunny. I'm excited.
Oof. Oof.
So apply it to the pink lethal and all that fun stuff. What do you think, Joseph?
Ooh, I think this strategy, it's really going to depend on what you want. You know, do you want which ability you want to be roaming around the board at any given time? Whether it's money, the rerolls, or if you just want a triple bunny to be roaming. It's all up to the player who takes the halo.
I think, ironically, the underground stations were created partially to, quote unquote, nerf the Heavenly Halo and the Pink Lethals. And now all of a sudden we have found a way to make them stronger. Because the previous weaknesses were, of course, to steal it. And now, if you control the underground stations, you can consistently steal it back. That's terrifying.
Oh no, we already broke the game.
What have we done? Shut it down. Stop the bunny banter. Go back to the previous recording where we hadn't discovered this.
Delete. We can't let this get out. This is top secret.
Now I'm glad we had to re-record, so we discovered these excellent aggressive passive strategies I'm going to employ.
I'm not glad.
Mikey's scared.
I have to play with Matthew.
Oh,
What?
you know what? This would actually work with the Trojan bunny, or the I forget what it was called. The Trojan bunny,
Yeah, maybe.
where you would put it on the underground station, and as it travels, you can just explode it at any time if you have the right card.
Oh, that's good. Wait, 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 wait.
So that's like,
Oof.
That's interesting. Well, maybe.
maybe.
I like where you're going with that. I like it. There's something to
Mhm.
that. I'm just trying to vision in my head. So you place the Trojan bunny on a bunny with the oyster cracker, and then once somebody rolls the underground station, the difficult thing is the person who owns the underground station controls which bunny to steal, if any.
Mhm.
So in order for them to steal the bunny, they have to want it. And if it has a Trojan bunny on it, then they perhaps don't want it. But if you put the Trojan bunny on
Ooh.
day trippers, now we're talking.
What?
Although it's still the owner of the bunny who has to play the weapon for it to explode. So it's still a slight difficulty there, but preventing them from playing the weapons, I like it. Oh, I got next level. Mix the Trojan bunny strategy with the Heavenly Halo strategy. And all of a sudden you have a bunny roaming around with the Trojan bunny. And now, wait, no.
That won't die.
I got one better. I got one better. Forget the Halo. Have a bunny roaming around with Mad Bunny disease.
Oh no.
What have I done? Oh, all of
Oof.
your bunnies are infected. All of your bunnies are infected. Oh, you're enclosed in barriers. Too bad. You have a underground station. All of your bunnies are infected. What have I done? I'm
Imagine if
scared.
in the bunny bits it says that it doesn't it specifically says that it doesn't mind barriers. Then you have a workaround and it will spread everywhere
We can
instead of
assume it
being able to
doesn't.
contain it.
If it doesn't say, we can assume it doesn't because it goes by underground station number and it doesn't rotate clockwise or counterclockwise specifically. It
Oh
literally goes
no.
underground and travels to the next station, pretty much. I'm
Oof.
scared. What have we done? So there we go. We have a way to kill the bunny that's roaming. Oh, I have another thought. What if Cyber Bunny or Ebola virus is on the bunny in the underground station, and the bunny in the underground station moves, and now all of a sudden you have a way to transfer to spread the Ebola virus or Cyber Bunny to a different part of the circle, ignoring barriers.
Oh my god.
What
So
have I
that
done?
would mean that would be a counter to wanting the underground stations.
That would be. And the whole combo involves day trippers because they're not going to take the bunny willingly. You have to get day trippers attacked by the roaming red, and then day trippers roams to the next underground station, and your opponents don't have a choice in the matter. And then, okay, so here's how it works. The opponent to your right plays, and the roaming red roams to day trippers. You play, day trippers roams to someone else. Before it gets to your next turn, the roaming red will roam to someone else inside that area. So now day trippers roams again after your turn again, and day trippers is safe. Well, if he survived. And the roaming red, which is Ebola virus or Cyber Bunny, is all of a sudden in this portion of the bunny circle, completely enclosed by those barriers. Think about the strategy involved in the timing of that. That's so precise. And it can avoid the Jarnak. There we go.
Oh,
A person enclosed in the Jarnak and surrounded by two barriers is now vulnerable if they have a underground station. I'm excited.
oh,
Okay,
terrible.
there we go. We have a way to kill a bunny in the underground station, which may have just become more relevant than we could have ever imagined in the first recording.
Wow.
Okay, moving on. Now we're into the cards that we hadn't discussed that much before getting to this point. And interestingly enough, because we found those new strategies, we actually came to a little bit over the time from the original recordings. That's pretty cool. Elephants in Castle, a non-aggressive run card that rolls the pink die, allows the player to roll the die and take the same number of Underground Station cards from the top 50 cards of the draw pile if the number rolled appears on the current date, day or month. So if the current date was 9/14 and you rolled a 9, obviously you can't roll a 14 on the pink die, you would get to take the 9 Underground Stations that are in the top 50 cards, if there are any. Your initial thoughts, Joseph?
I would like to start off by saying the top 50 cards. That's a lot of cards to sort through. So we would be able to look at the top 50 cards essentially because we'd have to make sure that they were Underground Stations. So in a sense, if you get this, not only would you get the advantage of getting the Underground Stations, but you would know what cards are going to be dealt out to players next.
That is an excellent point, and we'll actually get into a card soon here that has a similar effect. This one, just looking at the top 50 cards, good grief, that's a strong effect. If you are able to quickly remember the order, then you'll know out of the top 50 cards or so, slightly less since you drew some Underground Stations, exactly what each player is going to draw. And you can hand track them if you're really that skilled at keeping track of 50 cards. So, besides the ability of getting to take the Underground Stations, now I'm really excited about this one. How about you, Mikey?
Oh, okay. So, I'm going to go through the whole thing that I went through before. First of all, I have to say that this card has a little place in my heart because last fall I had the opportunity to go up to Winnipeg and do a showcase recital before a performance of the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. And I went up with some of my friends and some of my professors from school. And anyway, we went to Elephant and Castle, which is a restaurant that it's in Canada and the United States and Britain. Um, so that just kind of, it was a really cool experience for me. So that's kind of has a place in my heart. The other thing is, I thought the ideal time to play this card would be October 10th, and then you just need to roll a 10. Then you can have all the Underground Station. So
Well, it's only
if
in the
they're
top
in
50
the
cards.
50,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, if they're in the top 50. So you need to be extremely lucky. You need to roll a 10 on October 10th, and
Or
you,
11 on November 11th, or 12 on December 12th, because there's a 12-side die. Same odds.
I suppose. I was just thinking that there were only 10 cards. So I suppose you have a 3 out of 12 chance to win however many on October 10th, or I suppose you could do November 11th or uh, December 12th, I suppose. But anyway, it's I don't know, that's kind of neat. And you just got to be extremely lucky.
Yeah. Something to note, of course, is that on certain days you're more likely to succeed, and on certain other days it'd be more optimal to succeed. So, for example, if it was October 11th, for example, you actually have a even better chance because then you only need to roll a 10 or 11. So you have two opportunities for success rather than the one on October 10th. Then, therefore, the best, assuming all of the Underground stations are on the top of the draw pile, which is a crazy assumption, but just for a moment, assuming that, the optimal times to play this would be October 10th, 11th, or 12th, or November 11th or 12th, or 10th. Yeah, or November 10th, 11th, 12th, or December 10th, 11th, or 12th. Because then you have the best, you're getting the maximum value out of it, and you have the best opportunities.
I like this card particularly because it makes you roll the pink die. So, because of how powerful this card is, just letting you see the cards and obtaining some cards from the draw pile, it puts the pink pawn. It gives it a little bit more power, which it previously it didn't really have too much of an importance because there weren't many cards that required the rolling of the pink die.
Very
that
true.
were as powerful as this one.
Yeah, it's very nice to see the other colored dice becoming more relevant. Currently, I believe the brown die is the least relevant, assuming we're not counting the Chinese zodiac. And we will be getting a brown pawn with the release of Almond Crisp. So we definitely need more pink dye and more brown dye support. And it's nice to see high value cards that roll the pink dye. I completely agree. But yeah, looking through the top 50 cards, that's crazy. But it's only a 2 out of 12 to actually succeed, and that's on best case days. Unlike,
And
go ahead.
if you're playing with the other expansions too, the chances of drawing underground stations are actually quite low because I believe there are at least 600, 700 plus cards if you play with all the expansions.
13, 15.
13, 15.
Soon to
Wow,
be,
we've already reached that.
soon to be 13, 1369. No, that's not right. 1366. This
1366.
will be the new number of the drop file. So that's exciting.
So depending on which expansions you play with when you play your game, it will determine how high of a chance you have of actually obtaining underground stations.
That is very true. It's something that we discussed briefly with Jeff and Jonathan on the last episode, is how relevant our underground stations actually going to be. Because there's only 3 Oyster Cracker modifier cards, so in that sense they're not that relevant. But with Day Trippers, I'm pretty excited. I think Day Trippers is going to be one of those bunnies that, as an aggressive passive player, at least that's what I've been playing recently most often, I'm going to be buying that bunny back a lot, which says something. I'm more prone to get Day Trippers back than, say, something like the Pink Lethal. That's very exciting. So being able to draw, even if there's like 1 or 2 underground stations on the top 50 cards, which isn't too absurd to think, then that's pretty good. But just looking at the top 50 cards, ooh, that's some value right there. Plus 50 knowledge. How much do we value a knowledge at? How much dollar is knowledge worth? Last time I played Insight in a remix game, I earned $1 for that knowledge. Of course, Insight is 5 carats worth of knowledge. This is the top 50 cards worth of knowledge. I think
So $10.
so $10, sure. I'd accept that. uh, I think the strategy in my groups, delay of game tends to be considered aggressive, or at least a bad thing to do. If you delay the game purposefully, you're probably going to get targeted. So I think what you want to do with this card is, draw the top 50 cards, quickly glance through them, and estimate the approximate positions of any relevant things, like an extremely terrible misfortune or something like a pink lethal. Estimate the positions of each of those and know what the expansions they're from. And from there, you'll be able to deck track well enough where you'll be able to say, that next card is the pink lethal. Now I know that this player has it, for example.
You know what? Because the other players will probably believe you. You could probably tell them whatever you want, like if there are any important cards coming up, because that knowledge is highly valuable. You could even lie to them
Oh
about
yeah.
which card is coming up.
Oh
Get
yeah.
them kind of play like a mind game with your opponents. And the only one who will ever really know is you, because they won't be able to confirm it until the card is actually drawn.
Exactly. I'm just envisioning a scenario where I pretend it's an extremely terrible misfortune, and then it's actually the extra super pink. I warn a player saying, don't draw that card, it's an extremely terrible misfortune. Or very terrible misfortune is a better example because that would only affect them. And then I'm the next player turn and I draw it instead. I'm like, oh wait, I got it wrong, sorry. My mistake. That was unfortunate of me to make that mistake. That seems like a very aggressive strategy. I wonder if I can get away with it as the aggressive passive player. Usually not. So yeah, I'm excited about this card. We'll
I
see
think it's
how
a very good card.
relevant it becomes, and it's non-aggressive. That's huge. That is very huge. To know exactly, if you play this without Bunny and you're looking for a Bunny, what you do is you just make sure that you know which cards will be bunnies based on the relative positions. You're not actually going to count cards because that would take too long. So you would be able to perhaps manipulate how people play in certain ways and maybe warn them of misfortunes so that you'll be able to draw the bunny.
There you go.
It's a possibility. We'll see how well players are actually able to use it. I think highly skilled players that are really good at hand tracking will use this card to extreme effect.
Oof.
Next card here. Another non-aggressive run card. We're getting a lot of those. Keep calm and bunny on. So this card, as I read the text here, it's going to start sounding familiar, but there is an extra clause added compared to another card that I'll mention. May be used once by a player with no bunnies in the bunny circle to take any one bunny from the discard pile and to place into his area of the bunny circle, or may be used once by a player to eliminate all of any one player's Underground Station cards. So very similar to I Dream of Bunny from, what was it, Fantastic or Caramel, which has the first part of this card and is also non-aggressive. A player without a bunny can take a bunny from the discard pile. So it's already as good as that card. But then you have the extra effect of having the option of eliminating one player's Underground Stations instead. What are your thoughts, Mikey?
Well, I think so. Imagine you're in the situation where they took the day trippers, put the heavenly halo on it, and somebody has the red pawn, or perhaps all the red pawns, all the white pawns, and so they're constantly getting this triplet here, and then you're like, oh, I'm just gonna take this card. Oh, look, now you have no underground station. Now you can't use that day trippers. It's kind of a counteraction to that, especially if the rare scenario, if somebody had all of the underground stations, oof, that'd be bad. Or if you had a underground station, and if the two underground stations or all of them were split up between the two people, and so you just constantly are going back and forth between who has that day trippers with the heavenly halo, and you play this card. Well, there you go. Now it's yours. That's pretty awesome.
That's pretty great. And non-aggressive too. Being able to eliminate an opponent's thing without it being aggressive. That's big. Even if it's a minor
Yeah.
thing, quote unquote minor thing of eliminating the underground stations. What do you think, Joseph?
Um, so I would like to know actually before I state my opinion, what exactly happens to a bunny that's on a underground station, and then the underground station that it's on is taken away?
I was actually thinking the exact same thing, and I can only say we don't know. We can assume two options. Either the bunny will die, or the bunny will be placed in the bunny circle where the underground station was. We don't know
Mhm.
until we see the bunny bits, and hopefully it's clarified. If the bunny is supposed to die, it also begs the question: what happens to the Halo bunny? And presumably it would survive, if that's the case.
Ooh, that would be interesting.
We have to
Um,
assume the Halo bunny survives in that situation, but since we don't know, assume that the bunny survives.
mhm. I'm I'm gonna hold off on potential strategy that I was thinking about, but just until it's clarified in the bunny bits, when it's released. But what I can say about this card that I do know for sure is that I think it's a great card, regardless of what your position in the game is, because if you're behind on bunnies, then because you have no bunnies, then this helps the player that's behind obtain a bunny quicker. But if you're at the very top and you don't need the bunny necessarily, then you can kind of hinder your opponents. So it kind of has that duality to it.
Well, if you're at the very top, then if you have bunnies, you can't play it regardless, right? Oh
Hmm.
wait.
Oh,
Well,
you can, but you would
well,
only be
let's
able to
see.
use the
With no
other.
players, bunnies in the bunny circle to take any one bunny in this card player, or maybe use ones by a player. Oh yeah, I suppose you would if you. The wording would imply. I
Hmm.
could be wrong on this, but since it says maybe you use ones by a player with no bunnies, or maybe use ones by a player to eliminate, it would imply that for the second effect you don't need to have no bunnies. In other words, you can have bunnies.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I didn't notice that right away, so thanks for that. Because I'm imagining the scenario right now where you would use this to eliminate underground stations.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking if you have a underground station and your opponents have a underground station and your bunny was just stolen from because it has an oyster cracker, I would expect
Hmm.
you to want to play this card to eliminate that underground station so that it can't be stolen from that player again. That's a pretty cool interaction where, if you're using the strategy of forming an alliance between players with underground stations and switching around the Halo Bunny, well, then all of a sudden,
Hmm.
if you want to kick a player out of that alliance for whatever reason, maybe they betrayed the alliance, maybe you just decide you don't like them all of a sudden. You could just eliminate their underground stations, and that's pretty cool. It's nice to see cards that counter the underground stations right away, because usually what we'll see is uh, something like pawns getting introduced to the game in the orange booster, and then a few expansions later we get counters to pawns. In London booster, it seems like we're getting the counters right away. So perhaps in play testing, Jeff understood the relevance of underground stations and wanted to make sure that there was ways to deal with them. Even though at their core they're meant to be ways to deal with other things.
It's a blessing and a curse.
It is, depending on how it's used. Anything else we want to say on this card before we move on to our last card? Okay, so moving on to one of the cards I'm most excited for this expansion, MI6. A run card, again, non-aggressive. This one's really exciting. Maybe use once by a player to rearrange the top 20 cards of the draw pile. No conditions attached. You just get to look at the top 20 cards and put them in whatever order you want. Mikey, initial thoughts on this card?
This is awesome. This is cool because, well, first of all, you get to see the next 20 cards that are coming up, and you can take it and plan it correctly. Now, people might hate you for this because, one, you're taking up a lot of time, and two, you're putting yourself at the advantage. But if you plan it correctly and you you could put the cards so that you will draw the cards that will be in your favor. Now, a counteraction to that could be somebody not drawing or skipping their turn, and essentially then not drawing. And then that would kind of throw things off. I suppose then you could continue to skip your turn until you got back on track. You would miss stuff, but essentially you could change it up to be in your favor, which is pretty awesome. A thing that I thought could be cool, and I don't know how you would counteract this with another card, but if you took maybe a Doctor No or something, took a card, entitled it Doctor No, and then made a card that counteracts this, that would be cool. Because for those of you who don't know, Doctor No is the name of a James Bond movie, and James Bond is part of MI6 and all that. Okay. Anyway, I'm done now.
What do you think, Joseph?
I think it's interesting because you can, as the player playing this card, as Mikey said, you can basically choose which cards you want. Um, However, the counter to this would be if you were another player who knows that that player is purposely giving himself the good cards and being greedy, and you happen to have maybe a reversal of order, or some card like Baker Street that makes one player skip a turn, then you can throw off his whole order, and basically, if you time it right, you can take those cards for yourself.
You could.
Assuming that you believe that the player put it in such a way where he's obtaining only the good cards.
Very true. What I think I would do with this card is something I would do very similarly to the one we just discussed. Well, the Elephant and Castle, where I would look at for just the relevant cards, quote unquote relevant cards, some high value or really low value cards, and kind of ignore the medium value cards, and place them in such a way where I would remember where they are. So let's just say my next opponent has been really aggressive the whole game. Let's put the extremely terrible misfortune directly on top of the deck. And let's kind of play some mind games with this opponent and see if they know it's there. Because if I put a black card right on top of the deck, and my opponents know, if the next opponent knows he's been playing aggressive, he's prone to want to pass his turn if he's smart. Because you don't have to play your turn. It's optional according to the rules, or at least it would apply to be. So I don't think I've ever actually clarified that with Jeff. Fun fact. But he could pass his turn because he's spooked, and then the next player would pass their turn because they're spooked. The next player would pass their turn, they're spooked. You just keep going, and then it comes back to your turn, and you draw the extra super pink bunny because that's what it was the whole time. It has the same sort of strategy, except you actually have much more control over it. So what I would do is I would take the relevant cards and place them in certain positions in the deck, noting the card backs, of course, and keep track of who has which relevant cards, and hand track those specific cards, because it's going to be very difficult unless you're really highly skilled, maybe a professional poker player or something, to be able to track 20 cards. That'd be quite difficult. But maybe you can track 3 cards. And maybe as you play the card, you'll get better at it. Maybe eventually you'll be able to track 5 cards. And you'll know, okay, this player has the pink lethal. This person has Monumentally Mad Baker. So they're prone to buy the red pawn. This player has a red sinister. And so on. You pick the 5 most relevant cards or so, or as many as you can handle. And basically hand track those. Not necessarily giving them to yourself, but giving them to players that either will be nice to you for doing so, because anytime a player draws a good card as a result of this, they're going to thank you. At least they should.
Oh, I like that. I like that point that you brought up about not necessarily being the one to take the card that you might be keeping an eye on.
Yeah,
Um,
it can definitely benefit all types of strategies. The aggressive player will, of course, give themselves the 5 best cards, and we'll just time it accordingly. But a neutral or a passive player will definitely very strategically organize the cards in such a way where either they give a card to opponent knowing they can deal with it, or they give a card to opponent knowing that the opponent will give them something in return. And you have to make sure that you deck track correctly. And when you know that your opponent just drew the pink lethal, you should say you're welcome without any context. Don't reveal what it was. You should say you're welcome. Make sure that they know it was intentional that you gave them that card. Even if it wasn't intentional that you gave them that card, that someone else actually messed up the order and you meant to give it to someone else. You just make sure that they think it was intentional that you gave them such a nice card. So pick the 5 nicest cards in the deck. Know exactly when they're drawn. And every time someone draws them, say you're welcome. Or if it's the worst card of the game, make sure you give it to the most aggressive player, and then everyone else thanks you. There you go.
You know what? I actually play this game a little chaotically. So what I would do is I would wait. I would hold this card in my hand and I'd wait till someone has bad karma. And I think what I would do is I'd purposely put the strongest weapons in such a way where he would be drawing those strong weapons. and so he wouldn't be able to use those cards
Oh yeah, just give
unless he
him.
wanted to target himself.
That's pretty great too. Oh yeah, all the combos that you can include with this. Someone has bad karma. You just make sure that every time they draw, they're going to draw a high level weapon. Every single draw. That'd be incredible. Now the one
A
downside to
nuke,
this card,
black hole.
one downside to this card that was mentioned in the discussion channel of the Discord is that if you take too long in rearranging the cards, it could be considered delay of game, which tends to be considered aggressive, or at least you'll be targeted because of it. You need to make sure to go quickly with this card. It's definitely not a great card for new players, because new players need to read all the cards as they're rearranging them.
Yeah.
If you know all
Right.
the cards, you can just look through them quickly and be like, oh yeah, I want this one, this one, this one, let me put those in the exact correct positions, and then I'm done. You know, I say that as if it was quick, but that actually probably took around a minute.
Yep.
Right, as opposed to the 10 minutes it would take a new player. So that's something to consider. This is not a great card for new players. Trade this to someone who can trade this to a non-aggressive player, or me as the aggressive passive player, because I'll get away with it. who will be able to utilize it correctly and efficiently, so that the game isn't delayed and you still get all the benefits. Maybe you trade this to a player and tell them, I'll trade this to you if you treat me nice with it, you know, give me all the nice cards. And maybe they do that, who knows.
I think it also benefits players that aren't too high profile, that aren't necessarily seen as the main target in the game. Just because like if you're not getting the most hurtful cards, then you must be getting probably a better deal than what you would have been getting otherwise.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
I,
maybe well the bad player or oh I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Maybe while the player that's at the top is receiving all the bad cards, you would be receiving his good cards in return because it goes both ways.
Very true. Yeah, you could just pick the top. Depending on the situation, you would either pick the 5 relevant bad cards or the 5 relevant good cards, or however many cards you can mentally keep track of. Because at any point, someone can ruin the order, and you have to find a way to fix it as soon as someone's ruined it. For example, if you're working together with several players, it's easier for a passive player to fix the order, or a neutral player. Because if you're working together to take down the aggressive player, you could say to all the other players, that card right on top, you do not want to draw. You don't want to draw it. 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 And then you come to the aggressive player. And what are they going to do? Are they going to pass their turn as the aggressive player? Probably not. I mean, somebody has to give up the pass train eventually. But there's other ways you can manipulate it. You know, if you
And it's to me,
stealthily signal to the other players that they want to pass their turn. If it's just one player, it's easier. If you have to go through like 5 players that have to skip their turn to fix the order, I think it's a lost cause at that point. But if you just signal to one person to just casually, you know, maybe the aggressive player isn't paying attention, just casually skip your turn. You know, you just give a nice little signal to them, and the aggressive player doesn't notice. Then all of a sudden they draw a very terrible misfortune. They wonder what on earth happened. I'm excited. So that was the last card we're discussing today. Is there anything else we wanted to say about this card before we close?
oh sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, it was just a quick note. I think that this card has a lot of versatility depending on how you use it. It was just a final statement I wanted to make on this card.
For sure, yes. It's definitely going to, if you're good at using it, it's going to be a huge benefit. I think inexperienced players will have difficulty seeing the benefits for it, at least initially, because plus knowledge is a difficult thing to explain to new players. We might even do a whole bunny banter on it. You know, something like, you know, examining trades like offering trades for cards from your hand for cards in your opponent's hand without any intention of actually trading your card, just having your opponent offer different options, so you actually get to look at the cards in their hand. That's trades for knowledge, basically, and they didn't even realize that you did so. That's something that we definitely want to analyze on another Bunny Banter. Once we're done with the next 2 episodes, that will be on London discussion. There we go. We got a topic in reserve.
Here we go.
Okay, so thank you everyone for watching or listening. And thank you to Joseph for guesting today. Reminder, Joseph is the one who created the Killer Bunnies Discord. Everyone should join the Discord because it's pretty great. We organize games every once in a while on Tabletop Simulator. That's pretty great. If anyone would like to be a potential future guest, feel free to contact me in whatever way you feel fit. And if anyone would like to suggest potential topics, also contact me. Anything you'd like to say, Mikey?
Yes. Well, if you do want to contact Matthew, the best way is to tie a note to a rock and throw it through his window.
Got it.
Yeah.
I will respond to that.
Other than that, Jeff bless.
Jeff bless.
Jeff bless.